Here we go. All right, so we are so glad to have you guys here for February. Our school year is over halfway over. We have survived so far. Congratulations. I know that we've got a lot though coming up. For those of you worried about RSA, dealing with some of those, we've got a lot of things to start thinking about as we start wrapping up our year. So with our running agenda, let me get to where I can share my screen. Just makes it a little easier if we can all see what we're talking about. Okay, would one of my friends confirm for me that yes, you can see the agenda? Okay, thank you. So just for, as we're starting in, for most of you have been with us each month, and we are so glad to see so many familiar faces and names. But for those of you that might be new, my name is Melissa Algrim. I am the Director of Reading Sufficiency. So we get to enjoy this journey together. And I have three colleagues from the State Department here on the call to help out with. Deb, would you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Wade. I am the Director of Elementary English Language Arts.
Okay, and Lauren?
Hi y'all, I'm Lauren Jenks Jones and I'm the Director of Early Childhood.
And Brenda?
Sorry, I'm letting people in. I'm Brenda Bieber-Chow and I'm the Director for Social Studies and Personal Financial Literacy.
Okay, so the four of us work pretty tightly together to help with elementary literacy and RSA requirements and how all of this just really works together, which is why you have all four of us on these calls each month, so that we can make sure that we are all giving you a consistent message. And if one of us isn't available, that you can access any of us for those questions, and we will see what we can do to help you out. So, all right, so on our agenda today, a couple of quick reminders. The RSA allocation was paid out in full on December 17th. That money is in your account. Remember that with the RSA funds, we don't do reimbursements. This is your allocation, you have it, and then we track that through OCAS codes, or the Oklahoma Cost Accounting System codes. And we can just check to make sure that we are on track with what things need to be spent. I will make you aware that we are getting a lot of questions from our legislators about how RSA funds are being spent these days. So please do make sure that you have those OCAS codes there, and that you're making sure that you're making those notations that how that funding is being spent, because they are asking, and they should ask. They should ask how that, it's a lot of money. It's $11 million. I know it doesn't always sound like a lot, but when they're looking at every single penny, they certainly want to know what we're doing with that. If you are not sure what you can spend that money on, there is a funding checklist. This is located on the RSA Coordinator webpage. That shows the OCAS codes and the descriptions for what we can do with this. This has been in place since 2013-14 school year. For some reason I got muted, but this has still been there. So things that you can do, you can pay for salaries and teachers for before and after school program. You can pay for interventionists. And you can pay for any kind of outside of contract type teaching, like tutoring, summer school, Saturday school. You can also include those benefits in those salaries. One of the questions I get a lot is, can we pay for professional development? Absolutely, professional development is something that you can spend those funds on, and you can also pay stipends to teachers who participate in that professional development. There's some pretty specific information about the stipend has to be equal to the amount of a substitute teacher. And this would be outside of contract hours. So if I were a teacher and I'm going to a PD instead of teaching in my class that day, there's not a stipend because my school is paying for the sub. But if I go on a Saturday or in the evenings, my school may choose to give me a stipend equivalent to the hourly rate of a sub or daily rate of a sub. So that we can compensate for our time for that. We can also, for travel, one of these days we're going to get to travel again. We are excited for that day in the future. But just be aware that if you are budgeting for some of that, there are some things that can be covered and some that cannot. And finally, books and supplies. One of the key things to keep in mind with allocations is how does it affect our K through 3 students in the area of reading? It's not a K through 5 expenditure, it's a K through 3. I've clarified even with legal about, I've been asked about pre-K programs. This is specifically in statute K through 3. Any changes to that would have to be made through our legislature. That's not a decision we get to make at the State Department. And we are looking at how is this going to help improve students to read. So things like putting a book in a child's hand, that has an impact on being able to read. Buying a rug for the child to sit on while they're reading, not so much. That's probably not something we need to spend RSA funds on, okay? So kind of get through on the difference there. Also with technology, as a normal rule, we try to limit any technology requests for RSA funds to software or programs that directly impact reading. However, with everything going on with distance learning, this last year we lifted that and allowed the purchase of iPads, Chromebooks, etc., things like that, because everybody we know just is in a bind. This year, those requests are being approved on a case-by-case basis. So if you're wanting to purchase things like Chromebooks or iPads, please email me, tell me what you're wanting. Like we're wanting to get 18 Chromebooks for our interventionists so that they can use this particular program in their intervention. Or we need 24 more iPads so that all of our second grade will have iPads to be able to take their assessments on and do some distributed practice for some reading. So that kind of helps us get an idea of what's being asked for, and we can kind of go from there. I do have a couple of requests that are pending that we're trying to get some answers on, because some of those I need to go to other departments to kind of get some feedback on some of the bigger picture situation too. Okay, so guidance for promotion, retention, and summer school. That is the main thing that we are working on this month, is trying to make sure that we have some good guidance out for promotion and retention decisions. We know that that's going to be a big deal this year. I will let you know that we just finished doing a study over the data from years past, our trend data for RSA statewide. And normally in previous years, we have retained about 1,800 kids across the state in third grade. That's about 3% of our population. Last year, for the 2019-20 school year, we retained closer to about 1,100, 1,200 kids, which was about 2.5%. So we did
Do you need stuff today?
No.
Just in the future?
Yeah.
Just send me
one
what
of
you
my
need.
co-hosts mute to whoever needs to be muted.
Okay.
Thank
Are
you. So we did see a slight decline in the number of retentions. So this year, what I'm getting a lot of questions on is concerns about wondering, do we retain, do we not retain? How can we make sure that these kids are getting what they need in what situations? So we're working on that guidance. We hope to have that out by the end of the month. Or early March at the latest, so that you have that as you are moving into this last semester and making those decisions. There are a couple of documents that we created last year. I've had also questions, are we going to get that updated? Absolutely, we're also working on that this month. I have had a couple of schools asking, can we have that because we want them for conferences? Remember, it's February. And so the documentation that we're talking about is for promotion retention decisions made at the end of the year. So we wouldn't fill out those decision documents in February at a conference. It would be unlikely. So just kind of keep in mind, yes, we are going to get those updated, but keeping in mind, we also are going to get this guidance out for you as quickly as we can, and those conversations that we can have with our parents. A couple of questions have come up, and that I know several of you have hung with me for a couple of months as we're trying to wait for answers from legal. And we finally got those answers that I'm going to be able to share with you. And I wanted to make sure these were here in writing for you to have reference of. And as we continue working on that guidance, we will add to these FAQs as well. So the first question that has come up often is for a student who has previously scored well below grade level target in the past, and that they took their assessment, their beginning of year assessment virtually, and there was a miraculous event in which they scored well above their grade level target. And sometimes they've returned back to school and scored well below. And so the question is, does that score count? The answer that we have back from legal is that if there was a specific and documented instance where school personnel saw or heard a student being coached on one or more answers, then that school can re-administer the screening with that respectful clarification to the parent that this is an invalid score unless it's done independently by the student. And we want to keep in mind that and kind of go in with the attitude that the parents have been helping their students with distance learning, and that providing assistance was probably an attempt to help rather than an attempt to deceive, and just trying to keep that, that tone in our conversation. If there is not a documentation of a student being coached, then schools should accept the score. So what this means is that if a student met the end of year grade level target for 3rd grade, that student is eligible for promotion to 4th grade. It's, I mean, that's coming straight from legal based off of what they see in the statute. There is nothing, however, preventing a school from saying, you know, they've dipped back down. Now that they're back here, we do need to provide them some help. We do want to give them some intervention to make sure that they can be successful, either grades K through 3 or even beyond if the school feels that it's appropriate for that child. But for purposes of promotion retention decisions, if they have that score, we have been directed to accept that score. Okay. Another question that has come up is schools are starting to plan for summer reading academies with RSA funds. Is can those be held with either partial or full virtual instruction? Because there are some time requirements within summer reading academies. So it has to be 4 days for 4 hours each day, primarily for reading instruction. And the answer is that yes, this is permissible. We do, you know, I know I've had a couple that have sent me some pretty specific outlines for maybe having 1 day in person, and then some a work that would be equivalent to 4 hours worth of work. Doesn't necessarily have to be online or in synchronous version on video the entire time. It could be having a meet to do some instruction, and then time that would be working with. But it'd be definitely needing to warn parents that this is a pretty good time commitment because this is an intervention summer school. The caveat to be very aware of is that if you are planning on doing that, that you need to make sure that all students have access by providing an interface device, either your computer, your tablet, and making sure that they have abilities for connectivity, whether that's providing a MiFi or that they have access to internet for any students who would not normally have those resources. You can provide paper packets for those who are not able to get online for some reason, or if you don't have the devices to help that student to get on the internet access. But you must take some great care to ensure that it's a really equivalent instruction to what's being provided online, okay? Which can be tricky, I know. So let me pause there because I know that was a lot of information just right at the outset. Do we have any comments, ladies, that we need to address right now? Okay, I'm seeing.
The only one was asking about letters training.
Okay, we'll get to that one here in a moment. So I am going to ask, as I said, we are going to be working on some FAQs and some ongoing guidance. If you have some specific questions, either that you want an answer to, or maybe you feel that others would really benefit from this answer, we would love to have your help by dropping those questions in our chat so we can capture those, and that will help us frame guidance that would actually be useful for you. None of us are fans of just writing down a bunch of words to fill up paper, but we would love to have guidance for you that either you found helpful as you were getting started. If you are one of our experts in this state and really have a good idea that if you were helping somebody, they need to know these types of things, or if you are just getting started and you have some questions of where do we begin. So we would really appreciate some help in guiding that.
Okay, Melissa, you have a question.
Okay.
What about progress monitoring scores? Will they be counted this year?
Progress monitoring is a really important part of any healthy multi-tiered systems of support system that helps us know if our instruction is working. As far as would they be counted towards a promotion retention decision, yes, they're always counted that way. There's nothing that would change that this year. So if they are, if they're meeting that end of year third grade target and doing it through a progress monitoring session rather than one of the universal screening windows, that still is counts, because the way the statute reads is if a student meets that target at any time during first, second, or third grade, then they are eligible for promotion. Okay. All right. Just pause for a second. All good? Okay.
Yeah, you got another one. Would you clarify the summer reading academy requirements, days, hours?
Okay, so let me show you where you can find that. That actually would be over here on the State Department website. This is what we call the RSA coordinator and teacher page. And this is a really quick hub for everything else. So I'm going to come down here where it says RSA legislation. And I'll also add this into our running agenda. I'll just add a link when we're done so that you'll have access to it on this way too. But you'll see this in the rules. The rules were updated last year, which is why we have this. We need to kind of get this, the cleaned up version on here for you. I'm going to try not to make you motion sick as I scroll down to the bottom of page 2 where it starts talking about Summer Academy reading programs. And you'll see a list right here of these are the requirements. There must be at least 4 weeks of tutoring with a minimum of 3 hours each day for 4 days. So that's the timing requirement that we're talking about. It needs to incorporate the content of your reading sufficiency plan, which was approved this last fall. And it needs to be taught by teachers who successfully completed a professional development institute or program in reading as prescribed by the provisions of the RSA. That will be something that we can clarify in that guidance document of what would work for that. In the past, it has been training through, it's a specific training through Dyslexia, not just training on how to use Dyslexia, which is now called Acadience, but it's actually a class that I think that they don't even offer anymore. Literacy first training, letters training. We'll put some clarification out that because I know that's something we've gotten a lot of questions about, and there's a lot more training options out there that have become available that weren't available when we first made that list many years before I joined the department. And then this would also include only eligible students that are not reading on grade level based on results from your assessment. People who are from their screening assessment or from the state assessment. Who is it that's still needing support in the area of reading, okay? The alternative schedule will be for those schools that have a continuously learning calendar or like a full year school, year-round school. But this is kind of where our lawyers were looking when they were asked about a hybrid model as far as an alternative schedule, and that's where that came from, okay? And remember that the purpose of the Summer Reading Academy is to demonstrate that successful completion for promotion. And in order to do so, a student must either complete their portfolio, which likely would have been started during the school year. That's for Good Cause Exemption 4, for those of you keeping track. They could have that acceptable level of performance on an alternative reading assessment or Good Cause Exemption 3, so they can be offered to take that test again, or they can meet that grade level end of year third grade target on one of the approved screening instruments, okay? So by attending, the idea is that by attending Summer Reading Academy and getting that instruction, that they would be able to do one of those 3 things in order to be eligible for promotion under this Summer Reading Academy. Okay.
Okay, clarification. Does the 4 weeks need to be 4 consecutive weeks, or can it be 2 weeks in June, 2 weeks in July?
That is a great question that I'm going to have to get back with you on. I had not thought on that. What's a new one? So, but I love that we are thinking outside the box. And that question is in the chat, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So we will pull that one so that we can make sure that we find an answer for you.
There's a couple more. So is Summer Reading Academy only for 3rd grade students, or all students who are not on grade level K through 3?
It is for 3rd grade students and above. For students in grade 3, or those that have, it can also extend to the grade levels above with those that are still continuing to have issues. Okay.
And then one more, is Summer Academy a requirement?
It is recommended, but it is not required. Once upon a time, for those of you that have been around for a while, we did have a separate line item for that Summer Reading Academy. That was taken away and it was merged with the general RSA. And at that point in time, it became recommended but not required, since it was not specifically funded. Okay, great questions. I love them. Okay, let me flip over to another topic for just a moment with screening assessments and our dyslexia laws. Remember that I know we've had a lot of questions about dyslexia screening, because that was passed into legislation this last spring, that we would start screening for dyslexia. Dyslexia is being called out because it is a very common form of reading disability. And remember, it is also on a spectrum. So not all students with dyslexia are automatically for special education. There are some students that need some help in the classroom, and then there are some that are more severe and that need intensive intervention. We also know that the earlier we catch these kiddos and we address that, the better prognosis we have for getting them where they need to be with their peers, which is really the overall purpose of the Reading Sufficiency Act anyway. So it's making sure that we have that opportunity. The other point to remember is that dyslexia is an issue with word recognition skills. So thinking about phonemic awareness and phonics, those types of decoding skills, especially the phonemic awareness part. There are other students who struggle in the area of reading, dealing more with vocabulary and comprehension, that might have other issues such as a developmental language delay, or having, not having had access to different vocabulary. But dyslexia is one that's specifically dealing with word recognition skills, which honestly, if you're looking at about 80% of reading difficulties are in those word recognition skills. So it becomes a very prominent thing. That's why it's getting so much attention. So with the dyslexia screening, we do currently have a request for information. I believe it's being made public tomorrow, for vendors to submit different assessments that will go through a process. We have a very extensive rubric that will be compared to those different things that are being submitted to make sure that it meets the requirements for a dyslexia screen. And through that, we will have an established approved list for that dyslexia screening assessment. Those recommendations will be presented to the state board in June. And in the 21-22 school year will be considered a year for districts to pilot or explore those options, because it will not go into effect until the 22-23 school year. Okay, so that does give us some time to do a good job of going through and finding appropriate tools, as well as giving districts time to plan for that. And then at the same time, there's also being guidance that will be written. We're working in cooperation with the Office of Special Education, because this is one of those topics that bridges both of our offices for all students. And that guidance is being written so that districts will have, how do we use this? How do we make decisions based off of these scores? What do we do next type thing? So we promise it's coming, because we needed time to pull that together as well. And So along with that RFI though, it's also asking to update the approved list for our universal screening assessments. So our 7 assessments that we currently have, which is Acadians, Dibbles 8, STAR, FAST, iStation, MAP Growth, and I'm sure I'm forgetting one. But those, oh, Ames Web Plus, that's the other one. We wanted to have an opportunity for vendors to also apply if they felt that they needed to be on that list. It is the same. I keep getting muted for some reason. I would be very surprised if any of those that are already approved came off of that list because they've already met that criteria. So don't panic if you have one. We're not going to pull it away from you, okay? But one of the things is we wanted to ensure that we see that this dyslexia screening is an extension of the screening we're already doing under RSA. It's really just taking it deeper. So if you will recall, what we would do is that all of our K-3 students will have our universal screening like we already do. So for example, if my district uses Acadians, we will screen all of our K-3 students. Those students who are below that grade level target then might need a little bit more information. So that's when that second layer of the dyslexia screening would come in. So that would add things such as spelling, a rapid naming, advanced phonemic awareness, which would be things like manipulating the sounds rather than just blending or segmenting, depending on the grade level, the appropriateness for the grade level and the timing for all of that. So we're trying to make sure that this is a system that works together rather than seeing as one more thing to add on, but how do we make everything work together and cooperate with one another. Also, one other final reminder that the dyslexia professional development requirement did go into effect this year, which states that districts must offer dyslexia awareness training to all pre-K through 12 certified teachers and administrators. There is a free module that has been developed by OSDE. It's located on OK Edge. There is the login right there. To access that, you will need to create an account, each teacher would, to complete that module. I will just say that there were a lot of extra videos that were added in for extended information, which made that module a lot longer than was intended. You are able to go through that module without clicking on all those extra videos and work through the module that way and still be fine, still accomplish the purpose there. So just kind of keep in mind, because we wanted this to make sure it was something that was accessible to teachers and not incredibly overwhelming. So do keep that part in mind. Okay?
Melissa,
Yeah.
if a district created their own PD for dyslexia, is there anything they need to document for that?
I would contact Michelle DeBerry, and let's see if I can put her name in the chat. Her name is Michelle DeBerry, and it's at sde.ok.gov. She is the dyslexia specialist in the special education department, and she's kind of taken the lead on dealing with that. So if you can contact her and let her know, that would probably be best. Okay, somebody else responded.
So someone said she told us we couldn't create our own training.
Okay. So that, yeah, that one was being met probably more under the special education department, and we are kind of working through some of that. So
there was one other, all students wouldn't take the dyslexia screener, just those scoring below level on universal screener?
Under that law, yes. Now, if you wanted some more to take, somebody who was above, you had some suspicions and wanted them to do that, that's certainly fine. But the only ones required under that law would be those that were under the grade level target. It's giving just a little bit more information.
So there's a question I'm going to guess needs to go to Michelle. Can the free dyslexia PD be given to teacher education candidates who are in their last semester?
I am not positive. So
I would think that needs to go to Michelle.
Michelle question. So I love being able to say it needs to go to somebody else. So if you're still kind of struggling with some of the, let's see, Am I still sharing my screen? I don't think I am. I am? Okay. Don't forget that you also have access to the Oklahoma Dyslexia Handbook. It's on the SDE website that you can print that way. It has a lot of information to deal with dyslexia, as well as just what good core instruction for students who are struggling to read could look like. And that's something that will continue to be updated as needed. So, can districts use RSA funds to purchase a dyslexia screener? Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to merge that in that RFI. We know that there are several vendors that we already have as RSA screeners that are already equipped to have those additional subtests for dyslexia screener. It would just be flipping that on. And so one of the things we want to be able to indicate is if this vendor would satisfy both the RSA and dyslexia screener, or if it only does one or the other, so that districts can make a choice. If you have a screener that you've been using and it does not have the components needed for the dyslexia screener, but you just absolutely love it, then you can add on something that would deal with just the dyslexia part. Or if you're looking for a new screener anyway, because I have several districts that I know ask me about that and are wanting to look for just a one-stop shop that will deal with all of it, then we will identify those for you as well. So that way you have that opportunity. But yes, you can certainly use RSA funds, whether it's wrapped up in that or as additional, because what it's doing is it's still meeting the purpose of RSA, of identifying and intervening on students as early as possible.
We have one more RSA fund question. Could it be used for summer intervention for students under 3rd grade?
I would believe so, but let me clarify that, and we will include that in the guidance to make sure that we have that. We'll try to get that answer out to you as quickly as possible, because I know a lot of you are trying to get summer plans going now, so you need to get that information quickly. And Sharon, yes, those will be taken to the board for approval in June. So if the board approves our recommendations, then yes, anything beyond that, then we'll figure it out as we go. But that is the intention, is to take that to the board in June for them to consider for approval. So, okay, one other thing that we have on our running agenda that I wanted you to be aware of is we always try to give you a few extra resources. The first one is from EAB, and it's a Science of Reading Implementation Guide. And I know for several of you, Science of Reading, you're hearing a lot about that. Really, when you think about Science of Reading, we're not talking about phonics. We're talking about a database of research that has been taking place for the last several decades and over multiple countries, talking about how do kids learn how to read. It encompasses things, and you hear a lot of things like phonemic awareness and phonics a lot, because there are so many students that are struggling in those areas. But it also encompasses things like vocabulary and grammar and writing and all of those things that we know students need to be able to do to be good readers and writers. So this group has put together a very comprehensive guide on the science of reading. And there's things like a principal playbook, some different talking points. And this is kind of one of my favorites, because this is one I get questions about a lot, is what should a reading block look like? And some things along those lines. Sound walls. You're ever wanting to get information on sound walls, we have the worldwide expert on sound walls here in Oklahoma is Dr. Mary Dahlgren, and she does a lot of free conversations and talks about how to use sound walls to help students understand the sounds and how that associates with print. Okay. And then our friends at REL Southeast down in Florida have been working over the last several months of putting together of how to support family involvement with those foundational reading skills. One of the things that we have been concerned with a lot of the distance learning is that our early learners are really struggling with these foundational skills when we're talking about virtual learning and distance learning. Just because, and even with when they're in the classroom but having to wear masks, because so much of this is oral and having to really look at the shapes of mouths and dealing with sounds. And we know it's just very, very difficult. And we're seeing that in the data that's coming across, not only in Oklahoma, but nationwide. So one of the things that REL Southeast has done is they have created companion documents to a practice guide on, they had originally had on foundational skills to support reading, and created family involvement guides for foundational reading skills specific to each grade level. And the one for second grade just dropped last week. So it's nice to have that. Kindergarten started first, and I believe we've featured that before. But I'm going to click on just the second grade, and I believe they'll probably have one for third grade coming out one of these days. These are extensive. It's 187 pages long for this one grade level, but they've also included all Blackline masters that you might need. So if you wanted to give families an activity to help support their student, these would be things to consider if you were wanting to give them things for summer learning or extra support in outside of school. There would be some great resources here for you to look at, okay? There's some different links to some different videos, some activities, some spelling rules to consider. So a lot of information that can be somewhat overwhelming, but if you just take that little bit there at a time and thinking about how might you want to use something like this, this already has a lot of that hard work put together for you. So as you're thinking about those plans, please be aware of that. And then finally, we like to just highlight some podcasts because, you know, as we're trying to get out, walk a little bit, we've always got podcasts we want to listen to. These are 3 really good ones to, I know the TRL podcast I've been listening to in my walks here recently, that has just gotten started, the Teaching, Reading, and Learning podcast. And then Amplify Education has started a Science of Reading the podcast. So there are some that are wonderful. There's some that make me think a little bit or maybe question a little bit. And then there's, but it's always something that really can spark a conversation. And then finally, if you haven't listened to the APM reports with Emily Hanford, she really does a good job of summing up what a lot of the researchers and teachers that she's talked with are telling her, not to try to tell people how to do things, but to try to communicate what sometimes we as professionals aren't as good at communicating, because we stumble over our words, we get hung up in the jargon, and she puts it out in very clear layman's terms. So some of those resources, it's just always nice to have at our fingertips if we're looking for some. What else might we need to address?
Okay, well, we have a few questions I'll circle back to.
Okay, sounds good.
Will RSA funds cover all levels of the Heggerty teacher manuals, including pre-K and intervention?
If you are using the pre-K manual as intervention for your kindergarten classes, then that's in kinder, then absolutely it would. And if your pre-K teachers happen to borrow it, I guess there's nothing that stops that. You're going to have to read between the lines there.
I'm going back up to find the other one. I was also, someone asked about the resources. So we put the agenda link in here several times, and that's where they're located. So I don't know, are they located on your RSA site also?
The running agenda is also linked at the top of the RSA coordinator page. So in case you don't get that down, but let me, I'll just put it in the chat one more time there. It's just a simple bit.ly that says RSA Agenda 2021.
So running back a long ways to what we were talking about at the first. So in the conferences in February, they do talk to parents about if the summer academy might be necessary. The question is, if they meet winter but have not met end of year, should we still make them aware that this might be a possibility?
I'd say that's a decision that as a district, you might want to look at where is that child. If they're at the 39th percentile and they just have a couple of points to go and you think they're going to be okay, then that's probably not a conversation you need to have. If they're down at the 20th percentile, it's unlikely they're going to grow that much in a couple of months. I would definitely be having that conversation. And remember, you know, while we have to give a target and a benchline that we all can be consistent with, when it comes to our students and learning, they may be kind of wavering around that 40th percentile, and by the work that you're seeing in class, they're still needing help. And so that would still be appropriate to send that student to a summer academy because the overall goal is we want them to be successful. What we don't want is for our students in that kind of program that are doing very well and are looking for enrichment opportunities or daycare opportunities, but don't need the help. We want to make sure that this is a focused time for our students that are needing help with those reading skills.
Okay, it wouldn't unmute me. We got a second question about letters. Is the state going to have any letters training?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't get to that part. We are currently working on renewing that contract. The contract had expired, and due to all of everything else going on with the pandemic, it took a little bit more of a back burner than I would have liked, but we are working on getting that contract renewed so that we can offer some letters opportunities, hopefully this summer. But again, that's going to take some time to get that, you know, how everybody loves their paperwork. So we've got to get the paperwork in place so that we can all be legal about it. And but we are working to try to get that done. Yes.
Is there a date that teachers need to have logged in to complete the dyslexia training? Is it just during the school year?
I believe it's just during the school year. It just says that during the school year, they will have done that.
Okay, we're logging back up. Will we be able to do spring RSA probationary promotion retention digitally for spring? And will we also complete principal assurances again?
There's no reason that we can't do it digitally. And one of the things that we did last year is that we created a statement on those forms where the teacher could basically verify that the people who she indicated were at a meeting or on a call were there and were present and were a part of that conversation. So as long as the district is still comfortable with that documentation, there is no reason that you wouldn't be able to do that.
There's one last question about how are teachers informed about letters training? And I guess, I mean, we put it out in newsletters, but.
Newsletter, we'll put it on the website, but we'll also send it out in newsletters once we're able to get that started. So if you are not already receiving the RSA newsletter, I know Lauren does an early childhood newsletter, Deb does the elementary ELA newsletter, and we try to work together to coordinate to make sure that that type of information would be in all access to all of you. So.
Okay, so here comes some questions that are similar, I think.
Okay.
Well, here's one. Will the paperwork for the promotion retention be the same, or will there be new?
It should. I need to make sure that we clean up because we had some comments, like, for example, last year we specifically said that we did not take the state test. So just need to clean that up, but the crux of it, the bulk of that would still remain the same. There's nothing in legislation that has changed this year that would cause us to make any kind of massive change. We need to remove the exceptions that we pointed out last year in the absence of state testing.
Are plans for testing still on track? And I would say yes, they are. I don't know any allowances for virtual testing. I don't know exactly.
Actually, I can answer that.
Sure.
Good.
As a district test coordinator, I have monthly meetings with everybody. So they said that all virtual students will have to test in person. And if they choose not to, we're not held accountable on the 95%, but we tried really hard to get them here to test, but there's no virtual testing.
Absolutely. And that makes
Thank you.
perfect sense. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. And so I'm sure a follow-up question would be, what if you have a student, a third grade student that doesn't test, that just plain refuses to do so? We would, in that case, do what we would do any other year for a student that doesn't test. They have not met RSA criteria on the state test, so we would choose one of the other pathways to promote that student, or if we felt retention was in the best interest. So we look first, did they meet the grade level target on a screener, in which case they'd be promoted through that way. Did they meet any requirements for an exemption? If neither of those were met, does the student reading proficiency team feel that promotion with probation is in the best interest of that student? And if it's a unanimous decision to promote that student, and if it's not, then that student is retained. So that's something that we don't stress too much about. We already have those options available to us. So, and by the same token, I always like to remind that I hear language sometimes from our districts, or even sometimes our very worried parents that said, well, they were told that if the student doesn't pass, then they have to be retained. Remember that we have those other options. And sometimes I'll have very worried teachers that feel like we have to retain our students. Remember, we're retaining a very low number of students when you look at our data across the state. We may have to have a plan. If a student is struggling before we're going to fourth grade, we have a plan for how we're going to continue helping that child, and rather than just continue to pass them on. But we can still promote them to fourth grade with that plan in place. So we just always want to kind of keep in mind that while I know we all tend to get frustrated with some of the requirements under RSA, it is probably a very open law in that it does allow for a lot of decisions locally to be made based on the people who know that child.
Okay, a few more. Is the dyslexia training required by teachers, or is it just that the school must offer it?
The way the statute reads is that the district must offer that training. I don't know, like for example, with our bloodborne pathogen, where whenever I would go in, I would have to sign a document that I was there, or I'd go to the principal's office if I missed that meeting and have to do it again. I don't think any of that documentation is in place for this training. If I were an administrator, however, I would probably want to ensure that my teachers all were there, mainly because, or were participating, because this is something that's not going away. This is something that's going to continue to come up, and more.
Hi, Melissa. Melissa, this is Kristen Jones
Hey,
from
Kristen.
Enid. The email that I received from Todd Lofton and Michelle DeBerry in reference to that training indicated that we were to keep on site a like a sign off list or some sort of signed documentation locally of all the teachers who had participated in this training. It's not something we had to submit, but he said we did have to keep on file the names of those who had participated. That was his guidance to us back in September. So our special ed director is keeping that for us. But that was his guidance. It's not something we have to submit to the state, but we were advised to keep records.
Absolutely. And that way, just in case it came up with an accreditation or somebody that wanted to look into that, that would be available. But if you were doing this together with your staff on a staff meeting day and somebody was absent that day, like I said, it would be a really good idea to make every effort to make sure every teacher were involved. But since we're not turning that in part, keeping track of what you have, of who is attending and who is there, but not trying to hunt everybody down, if that makes sense.
So there's still kind of a clarification about what module they actually have to do if their district can create their own. And so I'm going to guess we need to talk to Michelle DeBerry about that.
Yeah, I think definitely contact Michelle about that. I think that's going under Todd
often in the Office of Special Education, who has the final say there. And I want to be very careful not to step on toes and speak out of turn.
And I think once you do the EDGE, don't you get a certificate?
Yes, and that's one of the
Okay.
reasons why each teacher needs to create their own login so that when you're through that, you can print off your certificate.
So then there was a question does this have to be done this school year?
This is the first year that that is required, yes.
Okay. Someone else said they're just keeping a copy of the certificate they get from the
That
EDGE.
works too.
Mhm.
That works, especially if you are virtual or spending a lot of time in distance. That way we can just send that on and not have to worry about having everybody together in a room where it might not be as safe.
Yeah, and I would say the last question is just the same thing. It's this school year. So
Yeah, this school year.
this school year with the
The
dyslexia
2019-2020 school year is the year that it has to be start, and everybody has to do it during this 19-20 school year. Okay. All right. Well, we will stick around in case there's any other questions that come up, but we don't have any new information for you beyond what we've already shared. We thank you for giving us a little bit of your time. We will get this recording posted. Usually I can get it back and turned around and posted within 24 hours. So if you have colleagues that were not able to be on here, you're welcome to share with them the agenda as well as the links to the recordings. Remember, that's found at the very top of the RSA coordinator page on the OSDE website so that we can find that quickly and easily. So, all right, everyone stay warm and be careful if you have to be out driving on these roads. And hang in there. We've got just a few more months. So we will try to get that out. In March, we will hopefully have an opportunity to go over any guidance for promotion and retention decisions. So,
Lots of people thanking you for all the information.
You know, I actually kind of look forward to these meetings each month. I like talking to people beyond my own kids. Any other questions that came up?
I don't see any. If you're still on and you had a question for Melissa, you could just unmute and ask.
Yep. Hi, Kendra.
Hi, Melissa.
Are you doing Plain Talk today?
I did do Plain Talk today. It was great. I attended Mary's Sound Walls.
Oh, good.
That's what I finished my day up with. I had David Kilpatrick and then Mary. So,
well, that's a pretty day. That's a pretty good day.
I'm telling you what, it was a jam-packed day. And I have one more webinar tonight. So,
all right.
Me too. I have two more actually. So.
I'm like going, my computer is just staying plugged in all day. But I don't know if you saw my comment, but I did say, I know you all never did these meetings before COVID, did you?
We did not. So,
and this is the best thing that came from that, because this information, people have these questions all year long and a lot of people don't even know who to go to. I'm lucky. I know you. So. I have your number on speed dial.
That's a good number to have on speed dial.
It is a great number to have on speed dial.
Well, and I think
anybody that shares Bananas Froster with me in New Orleans, we need to be on speed dial.
Absolutely.
But thank you all for doing this, because it's helping me help the schools I work with. So
good.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all of that. So, all right, friend, go enjoy the rest. Everybody else, stay warm and have a great February, and we will talk to you soon. And I better save that chat.